how you doing? Hope you're keeping well. Join me again on another magical time travelling adventure back to November 1983 for the next in our series looking at White Dwarfs through history. So this is issue 47, November 1983, and we're also going to be comparing it with a decade later, November 1993. This is issue 167. So let's plunge on in. Now, last time we looked a lot at the visual differences and the overall concept differences between these two magazines. So as I said, this one in the 80s, here we're looking at a very much a role-play magazine with a wide range of content, some of which, in fact most of which probably was distributed by Games Workshop but not necessarily created by them. By the time we get to this point in the 90s, we're looking at a very much a war games magazine, a miniatures based magazine, looking at exclusively Games Workshop published content. And over the next few years, as we continue to compare these magazines, we'll see that that process begin. But let us take a look now at White Dwarf from 1983. Now we've got the usual spread of adverts that was quite common in White Dwarf at the time, and here we are. We can see we've got four main features here, and then we've got a number of sort of littler, smaller articles spread in amongst. So we've got an article on demonologists, well sorry, demonists rather than demonologists, demonists for D&D. This is following on from the series on demonists in Rune Quest that we covered in the last series. Got some reviews, usual reviews, but actually this time I noticed this is reviews by lots of different people, and they're overwhelmingly positive this month. People had very good things to say about Privateers and Gentlemen, good things to say about The Asylum and Other Tales, good things to say about The Big Rubble, The Deadly City, from Chaosium. So yeah, positive reviews on this front. I don't know if any of these are still available. Do you have any of these? If you have, if you've played Privateers and Gentlemen, how does it stand up now? How do you feel about that up against modern role-playing offerings? Zine Scene we didn't see last month. This offers itself as an occasional column about fanzines, and this is advertising all of those sort of photocopied on your parents' office photocopier magazines that were doing the rounds at the time. We've got this claims to be the extracts from the travels of Tralk True Eye. Extracts from yeah, this is a one-off contained article, but it's interesting because this is looking at goblin society and trying to see goblins as a bit more than just your classic monsters, which obviously is something that later editions of D&D and other systems have looked at and gone into. This is trying to give them a bit of a culture, trying to make them not just your standard low-level monster. And it's one of those elements that actually we tend to think of that as being a fairly modern progression, possibly in role-playing, but it's been around since way back here. There are a lot of things that go back this far. In fact, if I skip back to the contents page, there's a note here that they've just received the results of a reader's survey. And the winner in the best cover category was that of issue 44, and I will let you look that up. But it says here that no matter what your opinion is about scantily clad females, there's no denying the excellence of Anna's dramatic and vivid style. And later on in the letters page, there are a lot of comments about that, you know, female armour and the way that women are portrayed in role-playing. So that's not a new development that people have been looking for. What should we say, more rounded, less sexualized views of women in role-playing games. That concept was floating around in the 80s. It's just taken a little while for it to sink down, and still possibly hasn't quite got there. But aliens for Traveller here, some fun crazy beasts. The final part of the Aurelian campaign, which we're going to have to go back, I think, and look at the Aurelian campaign in full, because this is a long, I think it's 6. Yes, this is part 6. It's a 6-part installment for a D&D city and campaign. And I think it's well worth going back and having a look at all of that. In this edition, we've got a nice full colour map here of the city of Aurelian. And in addition to the final part of the campaign, we have got a little bit on law, Aurelian law, military law, religious law and civil law in the city. So this is breaking down a bit of the narrative and a bit of the background in each. So by the time you've got all 6, you've got a fairly good overview of what's going on in the city, both in terms of current events and its history and culture. Morale for RuneQuest we've got here, and this is probably the main article in this issue, I would say. This is a Bushido article, and hence the Gary Chalk Undead Samurai on the cover here. I've never played Bushido. I don't really have any interest in playing Bushido, but as with so many of these self-contained short campaign ideas, story ideas, this is only a 3-page article, but there's a lot in here, and it's totally suitable for taking outside of the feudal Japanese environment and routing with a little bit of work in anywhere that you're playing a campaign. You know, the map and the characters described can very easily be transferred across, and probably the stats can too. If you're worried about stats, I tend to play campaigns that are based on characters, but I guess you've got to have the stat lines, so they're going to be somewhere. But this is an amalgamation of Japanese ghost stories, so it's quite appropriate for November. We've just had Halloween, and some of them are spooky ghost stories, and some of them are sort of vengeful ghost stories, and some of them are very nice, sort of not romantic, but quite spiritual ghost stories, and they're all sort of woven together into one narrative. So you've got lots of things overlapping in the story, although it's very short. In the brief descriptions of the characters and their aims and what the players might encounter in the setting, you've got these overlapping storylines that mean that really it could go off in any direction depending on which way the players choose to relate to the different spirits. It's a very, very interesting article there. There's also, here's a very short, this is a page, and this is not so much a campaign necessarily, but it's two items that readers of White Dwarf have created and have sent in, and so somebody has taken that and has turned it into a mini campaign featuring those 2 items, which are in this case the Dorianic portrait, so picture of Dorian Gray reference, and an ebony horn, which is about summoning undead. So this is about a necromancer who's put his soul into the portrait, and the players have to discover that. Okay, some D&D and AD&D monsters. Again, this is monsters that readers have sent in, so a lot of contribution from lots of different people here. We've got a little bit of miniature representation here. We've got the troglodytes, lizardmen here, and a Tony Ackman orc siege weapon. Some of the very few photographs of miniatures in this magazine, I think I mentioned last time, there's very little actual miniature content in here. You've got the same Chronicle advert here, and then not really any pictures of miniatures apart from these. Thread the Barbarian, of course, the Carl Critchlow regular feature, and the Travellers. Then we're on to small ads, and then the thing ends really. So you've got those few features, the Aurelian conclusion, the Bushido adventure, and a mini D&D adventure here. Oh, plus the Goblin cultural overview and Demonists for D&D. So there's four or five features. Is that what they list them as? Yes, in fact, the portrait scenario is not listed as a feature. So there's your four main features, and then lots of little bits that you can throw in and out as you will. Right, let's move forwards 10 years and let's take a look at White Dwarf 167 from November 1993. The cover is David Gallagher's, of course, Skaven Army book cover. The Skaven Army book were not released, not announced in this edition, but there is a mention that it's coming, so presumably it's not far away if the artwork has been done. And there's obviously the Screaming Bell here that was new to this version of Warhammer 4th edition. Warhammer 4th edition very proudly displayed on the inside covers here. But we're still in the realms of 2nd Ed 40k being very new. So we've got articles on Space Marine Dreadnoughts and Predators, the big vehicles coming out, and the vehicles had started to come out in the end of Rogue Trader. There was the vehicle manual. This Games Workshop had started to do these plastic kits, but really in 4th edition it was that the vehicle side of 40k really started to come into its own. And something that I didn't realise was this early on was the Blood Angels Space Marine Death Company. Death Company are one of my favourite aspects of Space Marines. I'm not a big Space Marine fan, but I do like the idea of the Death Company, and the Death Company Chaplain is one of my favourite Marine models. So I was surprised that it went right back to, this is a month after 40k has been released. I tend to think of it as associated with the Angels of Death Codex, which is about, what's that? It's going to be something like 193 or something, so can't add up here. 167. So 170, 80, 90, so we're looking at about 26 issues on is when I imagine them coming to the fore, but no, they're right back here from the start. Data sheets for playing vehicles in 40k, and here we are 1 year on Warhammer 4th edition. So this is a year since the release of Warhammer 4th edition, very much in what people are kind of calling the Middle Hammer era, the Hero Hammer era, and there's a bit of FAQ here, there's a bit of look forwards to what's coming, and also a look at some of the confusion and problems that players have had with the current or with the 4th edition rule books. But it's mostly positive, and it's mostly talking about things that are gonna be coming out soon. Warhammer Magic is going to be coming out soon. We've got Man of War Shore Forts, so this is expansion from Man of War dealing with fortifications on land and fighting campaigns in Man of War. I don't think the campaigns here tie in with Warhammer Fantasy Battle or with Mighty Empires, both of which are around at the time, but I just don't see any reason why you couldn't be a bit inventive and bring those land battles in with Warhammer battles. And to go with this Shore Forts article a bit further back in the magazine, we've actually got a modelling workshop, these wonderful terrain building articles that White Dwarf, certainly they used to be a highlight of White Dwarf for me. Junk modelling terrain before the advent of all the plastic kits, when they just said, oh, buy our stuff and put it on the table. This is back when you were encouraged to actually make scenery, and of course had much better looking battlefields for it. But this is using polystyrene rocks and bits of plasticard and bits of balsa wood to build those island fortresses for Man of War, using in fact some of the Mighty Empire's bits in places. In between those we have an article on flying monsters. Now I mentioned 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle has earned the nickname Hero Hammer along with 5th edition. Big heroes on big flying monsters with powerful magic items were very much the flavour of fantasy games at this time. And I'm not sure if this is Rick Priestley attempting to say don't do that, or attempting to say do that. That's exactly what you should do, because there's a bit of both in this article. He talks about how flying monsters are extremely useful for dealing with especially things like artillery and powerful characters in the ranks, but also he talks about how expensive they are relative to other troops, and how really, especially if you're using a turn flying high to reach your opponent, they are a one-hit wonder. They're going to come in, they're going to do one thing over the course of the whole battle, so you've really got to make it count. There's some good tips along with extracts from a previous battle report here into how to get the most out of your flyers, and also how to deal with flying monsters. So it's a nice balanced article. It looks at both sides, and there's nothing that you couldn't really deduce yourself from looking at the rules. It's nice to have one of the game's designers sort of talking about it, and yeah, sort of affirming things that you might draw out, and pointing out things that perhaps you might not notice. For example, he says that these army lists are balanced for, or the way that monsters work in the army list is balanced for 3,000 point games with a 4-turn limit. So if you're playing larger games, or you're doing without the turn limit, then the value of flying creatures in your ranks grows exponentially. So that's just a warning to players to not let things spiral too much out of control. I wonder if Games Workshop would give you that kind of warning these days. We've seen the modelling article, and we have a battle report, of course. Second month of 40k being out, so of course we've got another 40k battle report, and we've got a battle report which features just the models that were in the 40k box with one of the scenarios from the 40k box, so you can see exactly what you can do with the box, and it's really an example of play, which is very nice to see. Even using the cardboard terrain that came in the box, so that's very much you've opened the box, what can I do with it straight off without going off and buying all the vehicles and things, so that's cool. And then we've got the bit that I always used to love. I used to love going through these catalogue pages in the back. Chaos warships, Norse warships, Orc warships, hobgoblins, drooling over the pictures of the miniatures, which of course you don't get in the older version. And naturally, with an article on flying monsters in it, you're going to get a lot of flying creatures in the back here. These are great things to have, and here's where you can buy them. And of course the Space Marines and the Death Company Space Marines, and one of these lovely photo vignettes. Again, just so eye-catching. I love the artwork of the 80s. Of the 80s role-playing magazines, and it really suits them as role-playing magazines, but they just don't quite catch the eye or the attention as much as a nicely painted battle scene. And I say even the modern photos from Games Workshop are very photoshopped. If you look closely at the models, they're not that brilliantly painted a lot of the time. They're relying on the lighting and the photoshopping and the sheer scale, the sea of miniatures to suck you in, whereas here you've got a handful of things that have been newly released or freshly released, or are relevant to the articles in the magazine, and just not, there's probably 24 miniatures in here. I haven't counted, no more than 24 miniatures in here, but the scenery and the background and the layout is just so eye-catching, along with of course the vibrance and the brightness, which probably helps. This is the red era of White Dwarf. We're talking very vibrant pictures here, rather than the grim dark of future editions. So it really does sort of suck the eye in. It's a lot of eye candy. So there we are. That's November 1983 and November 1993. So join me again next month for the December editions, and next week for something different. Thanks for joining me.